Hey guys, Jarretman here, back with another 500 Zoom video, picking up where we left off from the last video, if these are airing in order anyways. I'm tempted to call the ace-2 suited, given the weaker player in the big blind, and I am going to. It's only a min-raise as well. This is usually not a call though. I think this is usually just a fold. We get to do a lot of betting because we have the stronger condensed range as the caller, and I don't hate our hand for betting. And I think we want to do a lot of small betting. Even with our strong hands, I think just using this size is best, I would say. Even though the big size might get used with some portion of our range, like straights and sets and two pair. And sorry about that sipping noise that you're going to hear. That's me drinking coffee. My performance enhancing drug. How do I feel about my blockers for bluffing the river? I don't like that I have spades. I expect to lose to ace high a lot, but that's fine. We'll lose to ace high. And 10-9, yep. Bluffing this would be very reasonable because it's the bottom of our range, or at least close to the bottom of our range. I was just thinking when we have ace-2 of spades, we block hands like ace-10 of spades, ace-queen of spades, ace-queen off with the ace of spades. Hands that are more likely to float the flop because they have the ace of spades, and then now on the river they're just ace high and they're more likely to fold. I think playing a strategy that has some checkbacks has a lot of advantages in this spot when we're playing specifically hijack versus under the gun. And if we bet, I think I want to go for the overbet. Considering we started a little bit deeper, we can overbet as thin as a king, I believe. I don't think we need to worry too much about his 10x. However, if we're just like always overbetting the turn, then he can just start, you know, checking his 10x to us and just printing. So gotta be a little bit careful. Running out of time on table 2. Ooh, okay. This is interesting. I think all I did was I saw this guy limp under the gun and then I marked him as a weaker player. Okay, we'll call. Ooh, okay. Dino's a good player, and he's saying Raffle at me, so maybe this is never chosen as an overbet on the turn. Like this, the size isn't used on the turn, but I don't know. There's so much stack depth remaining that I have a lot of hands that want to put in the money on the turn that aren't just the 10. If this was, 6, 5, 10 king, then it makes a lot more sense. But when there's two 10s out there, I think it does make less sense. You can go for the small bet. You can go for the large bet. You can have a check back range. You can do whatever you want on table 1. Okay, we'll check it back on table 2. We want to be betting sometimes, checking it sometimes. And we'll go for the overbet on table 1. And depending on the river, we might check back. I'll raise like 2% of the time. Ooh, just missed it. I'll check this one later. I think that when we have ace king, aces, and king queen, all of those hands are strong enough to overbet. And with the stack depth remaining being slightly bigger than 100 big blinds effective, it can make some sense maybe. Another option for this hand, by the way, is just to bet small with your range on the flop, and I think that plays very well. Honestly, that's probably the best, simplest strategy. The simplest, best strategy, at least, is to just bet your range small on the flop. Like 30%, 40%, something like that. You're doing better overall. Because your 3-bet range is linear, you still have lots of 10x. You know, in fact, if you wanted to play every single 3-bet pot where you are in position versus an out of position caller, so when you are button, cutoff, or hijack versus anyone who calls you out of position, you could basically bet 1/3 with range across every texture and not lose like a crazy amount of EV. We'll call sometimes 3-bet mostly. We're a bit deeper, so I just size up 3-bets when out of position, especially big blind versus the caller, because when you're in the small blind, you still have the big blind left to act, who could be only 100 big blinds deep and just gets to profit more because their cold 4-betting range doesn't really change. I think there's no reason not to do a high frequency small c betting strategy. Even though we don't have 5s and 4s, maybe there is a reason actually to. Maybe there is a reason not to. I think ace 10, we get our low number. I think ace 10 can definitely barrel here. Jacks can barrel, I think. Queens and jacks can definitely barrel. If we bet on table 2, it's an overbet, and it's because I think he doesn't check back enough flush draws on the flop. But otherwise, I think our preferred bluffs are going to be club blockers. And on table 1, we can check or we can bet small. Both make a lot of sense. Betting small has the added benefit of him potentially not raising us with all of his king X, which means that, yeah, like he didn't raise us with ace king, which means that we get to dictate the price. Whereas if we check and he decides to bet, he's going to be betting for a larger size. But you know, that's not really good logic. It just it's just something that does happen. So I wouldn't hate an overbet on table 1. Also wouldn't hate a small bet or just a compromise. Okay, we'll go with the compromise. And checking or betting on table 2, both can make some sense. However, most of our range wants to check. I wonder if our hand is even strong enough to check raise on the turn. It might be. It's not that crazy either, honestly. Okay, I'm gonna go for it. I'm doing a lot of spewy stuff these last two videos, like stuff that I'm not sure about. And we'll go for the normal size on the river. We're trying to rep a bluff here, which I think we're doing pretty well. This hand is not GTO approved, I'm pretty sure. If you assume that your opponent isn't checking back a 5 enough on the flop, or ever, which I don't think is true here. I think Bonk is a good player, and I think that he or she will be balancing the check back range on the flop. But if we do make that assumption, then I think Ace-8 is strong enough to check raise on the turn, as we block a lot of the hands that would... When we have an 8 specifically, we block those 2 pairs, those turned 2 pairs. So we're almost always ahead. There's a lot of protection to be had, and there's a lot of value to be had. So on the river is close though. I think I screwed up this river spot. I think that betting 1/3, you know, with our exact holding, betting 1/3 seems better. But again, like I said during the hand, I was trying to rep a bluff, if that makes sense. Queen 8 suited, not strong enough to 3-bet, not really weak enough to 3-bet. 10s, I'm not going to 4-bet versus this guy. This is the guy that called Queen 5 suited small blind. A lot of protection to be had. We're not folding the Queen 8 suited. If I was paying more attention, we would roll it as a raise, like low frequency. So when he check calls, I'm actually, like, especially check snap call, I'm either putting him on a hand like Ace King with a heart, or, you know, aces, kings, no heart. And I think versus that range, I want to bet just the normal size. And we get our low number, we'll check back the Queen 8. And now I'm trying to think greedily, what's the most I can get from a hand like... So if he has Ace King with the Ace of Hearts, King of Hearts, we're really never getting money unless he decides to use that as a bluff, which I don't think he will. So we're just trying to get paid by, you know, aces, kings, no heart, I guess. And I want to go for like a normal size, or even smaller than a normal size. If he has, you know, aces, kings with a heart, I think we're more likely to get called with our big size. I expect those hands to check raise the flop some of the time. I don't know. Maybe not. Let's see what he had. He did have the King of Hearts. Okay. So I lost a little bit of value. I could have went a bit bigger on the river. I think still get called always. The question is, like, do we think that he's ever calling the... Sorry, do we think he's ever folding the turn? Ever folding the turn. This is a very high frequency check back. Ace jack off on this texture with no club, but we rolled a 91, and even this hand gets bet some of the time for the big size on the flop. Gonna play this as a big better check back, and then on the turn I see no reason to bet with our hand. Not quite strong enough to call, and he went to a bit of a bigger size. So yeah, I was trying to get called by a hand like, you know, ace, queen, kings, aces with no heart, as that's what I'm expecting most of his range to be. Maybe even, you know, jacks with a heart. So I went for a bit of the smaller size. But if we wanted to target... just folding, nothing to do but fold there. If we wanted to target these types of hands, I think we could maybe even jam versus a weaker player. I don't think they find folds enough when they have overpairs with a heart here. Gonna make the tight fold with ace-8 suited, small blind versus cutoff. 3-bet sometimes, call sometimes on table 2. A board that is slightly better for the big blind, but we're not crushing it as we are on some of those lower boards. Because we 3-bet 9-8 suited, we 3-bet 9s, we 3-bet 8s, we 3-bet 6s, you know, low frequency. But we do have, and we fold 7-5 off, but we do have more 10-7, which is a thing. And just more interaction in general. We get our low number, we'll check it back. You know, versus good players who are going to be checking their range or checking appropriately and then playing aggressively after they check. It makes sense to have a decent check back range, and similar thoughts on the turn. We are a little bit protected, but not completely protected. But I think given blind versus blind, any ace has to bet this river. And our bluffs, we can choose from lots of hands that have a diamond blocker. Because we're blind versus blind, our range is so wide that we do have the luxury of choosing like some offsuit broadways that have a diamond blocker, or even a hand like honestly, I'm tempted to call. We're gonna call half the time. Okay. We get a fold. I just don't believe him, but whatever. I'll call half the time. That's a thing, I guess. Table 1, I'm going to have 2 sizes. I want to have a small bet and an overbet. I don't think this hand class ever wants to overbet, but it might want to small bet some of the time. We're still checking more often than we are betting on this turn, though. And table 2, we're going to fold the 9s half the time. Okay, we get a call. So this board is, it's a bit different than that other board. Oh, that was in a different video. Never mind. I was going to say, we don't really want to have any leads on this board here ever. Okay, we'll go for the overbet. I don't think this hand actually gets chosen as an overbet. The thinnest we can bet here is like a decent 6. I forgot that guy loves to call me. Yeah, that was just bad by me. So this might be a turn where... No, never mind. It's a better turn for us, but it's not good enough that we should start having leads. I don't think. And we still have these hands like King Jack of Spades, King Queen of Diamonds on the flop that are just total bricks. It's not like all of our range. Do we ever want to jam this turn? I don't think so, to be honest. I really don't think so. I think too much of his range is over pairs. I don't know. Jamming wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. As far as river calls go, I think it's strictly better to have a club. This one's super close all around. You're always in such a bad spot when you're the out of position caller in these spots. You're always in such a low EV spot. And Demon Doik is a good reg. he's likely going to show up with the hands he's supposed to show up on the turn, which means he's going to show up with some just pure overcards. You know, which makes protection jamming a hand like pocket nines a lot better on the turn. Not to mention, you know, we have 10 outs versus an overpair, which is decent. You know, 20% equity when we're called and we're behind, unless he has pocket tens. Yeah, I think the hands that want to jam the turn are going to be more like, you know, 6-7 suited. Still need some protection, but just way ahead. I don't know. I really don't know. Not a fun spot. We're going to be mostly folding this, but he does give us a good price, so we'll call it 25% of the time. It's not even a pure open from that position. I was just lazy, I didn't roll it. Not much he can do about that. We'll 3-bet 25%, call the rest. If we're facing the 3-bet here, then I think we just have a fold. Yeah, let's watch this hand though. Easy call with the queen 10 of diamonds. I like the fact that Bonk's using a bit of a smaller 4-bet size here. A lot of people are using like the 3x size. Even I'm using like just under 3x size. I was thinking about changing up my out of position 4-bet sizings. So no raises on this texture at all, really. I think the only hand that does want to raise, I guess, would be pocket jacks. The low amount of time that we have pocket jacks. If we have a set, we don't want to raise. If we have 2 pair, we don't want to raise because most of his range is going to be overcards, which is, you know, drawing dead versus our hand. What happened there? I went check bet fold. That's interesting. Again, we have the ace-2 suited here. I'm just gonna make the fold. So our preferred bet size on table 2 is going to be 1/3 in this spot. The primary reason we're betting is for protection. We do get a low number and we do want to have some checkbacks, but I think that we want to be mostly betting with almost all of our 10x. A 10x here is just so strong in the 3-bet pot. Again, was the king jack hand in this video? Yeah, it was. Okay, this hand is a very high frequency check on this board. I'm going to play this board as like a medium better check. And table 2, it's too thin when the flush completes, I think, to jam with queen 10. Ace 10 is close. I think we can fold versus 1/3 these positions. We block ace 4 of clubs, that's a thing. So our hand is so strong on the turn. So strong because most of his overpairs aren't going to be checking the turn. They're not supposed to be checking the turn. The line that makes him the most money in this spot is bet flop, bet turn, jam river. That's it. That's the primary line his overpairs are going to take. And it's okay from his perspective to collect less, less EV when he's in the checking range because he makes up for it when he's in the betting range. So when he does check and we have queen 10, we just have the nuts. We just have a really, really, really strong hand. Obviously, we're behind sometimes, but most of the time we're not. A similar concept to this board here. When we flop ace 10 and he checks, we just have a strong hand, and it's another spot where our preferred size is the small size. The primary reason we're betting is for protection. This allows us to bet with hands that aren't just ace 10. Nice hand to bet with on table 2. This Some people use an overbet size on this flop, which can make some sense, which does make sense, I should say. So yes, we want to have some checkbacks, and Jack 10 and Queen 10 are the 10s that want to check back the most, I think. If I had to guess, those would be the 10x that want to check back the most, with 10-9 and Ace 10 and King 10 wanting to bet way more often. 10-7 suited as well if we have that pre wants to bet, because they need more protection. But in this spot, I think we just always want to bet with a 10 usually. You know, we'll balance our check back range with some draws as well. So it doesn't even matter if we're completely capped on the turn, because the river is going to change what the nuts are a lot of the time. And in this spot, the check jam is a real thing from him. So we don't really want to bet our high equity draws on the turn that would have to fold unless it's a really, really high equity draw, like, you know, 10-9 of clubs or Jack 9 of clubs, Ace 9 of clubs, something like that. The 1/4 size doesn't really make too much sense from his perspective in this spot. I'm expecting an Ace X almost always, but I'm expecting an Ace X or nothing so often that I'm not even going to bet the Jacks on the river here. Jack would have been nice on the river. So his squeezing range versus button under the gun is going to be tighter than just the normal 3-betting range. He went to a huge, huge, huge squeeze size, and I'm 300 effective with the under the gun. And Ace Jack suited isn't good enough to 4-bet in that spot anyways. Whereas King Queen suited would be a better 4-bet than Ace Jack suited. Not quite strong enough to open here, the 10-5 suited. Wouldn't be the craziest open in the world though. Oh yeah, I get some messages and some comments sometimes, like people that are saying that they're trying to get something going in poker, but then they'll make a big mistake, they'll go on tilt, they'll do a big spew, they'll do a big punt, whatever you want to call it, and they lose their confidence, they lose their ability to play. And just remember, it's okay to make mistakes sometimes. The only people that don't make mistakes sometimes are people that are cheating, or people like Linus. It's okay to make mistakes sometimes, and it's okay not to know every single spot. Like, not to say that I'm a very good player or anything, but compared to some of the players in this pool, but I have done well over a decent sample in this pool, and there's lots of spots I don't know exactly what I'm doing, where I'm still learning, where I'm making mistakes, so don't feel bad. I think he's got like an 8 or a 7 a lot of the time, and I'm just wondering, does he ever fold that? I think the answer is yes. I think we can get him to fold an 8. I think we can rep a hand like Ace Queen, Ace King, or sorry, Ace Queen, King Queen. Yeah, rep a hand like Ace King and he calls us. Yeah, that makes more sense. Put me on Ace King. I don't even think our blockers are necessarily good in this spot. Yes, the 4 blocks 6-4 suited, but it also blocks a lot of his bluffs, like if he had a hand like this hand, or King 4 suited, something like that. I just think when he bets that size on the river, I'm not expecting him to show up with a hand better than a 1-7 or 1-8 ever. All right, 30 minutes. Yeah, that's good enough. We're gonna play to the blinds. It's kind of nice outside, so I kind of want to go for a walk before it gets not nice. So queen jack suited is a pure squeeze here. Unless we have information that the small blind is, you know, calling with a pretty ridiculous range, this hand just gets moved into the squeezing range always. The suited broadways play really nice as squeezes, blocker wise and playability wise. And that's about as nice of a flop as you can hope for. I'm tempted to bet big, as I think a weaker player's calling range on this board is going to be inelastic. I don't want to bet too big. I don't want him to fold a hand like, you know, if he has ace-5 of clubs, I don't want him to fold. And when I say big, I mean like not betting 1/4. You know, if he has a hand like king, queen, you know, jack 10, ace, jack, ace, queen, all of those hands I think are going to call versus that size regardless. But if I bet, you know, pot or 75%, some of those one pair plus straight draw hands might fold. And if I bet 1/4, I don't charge them enough. Not to mention he has just naked flush draws that have to call basically any size. Okay, we get a call. We'll make the call. I've said this lots of times before, but if you wanted to play your button versus cutoff as a 3-better fold, I think that's very reasonable. If there was no rake, then I would say you're giving up too much EV. But if you calculate these spots out with the rake, then you'll see that you don't actually gain any EV by having a flatting range. Versus the cutoff specifically. Versus hijack and under the gun, you do. Okay, we get a fold. This hand actually, it calls, I think half the time versus the squeeze. So first of all, it 3-bets, I think half the time. And then when it calls half the time, it calls an additional half the time versus the squeeze. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Take care.